All right.
Yeah, just continue. There is a website that monitors the global food supply. And when I was looking at that a couple of years ago, uh, it seems that even in so-called normal times, uh, this is before pandemic, before this war in Europe and all the rest of it, that there's about 90 days of food supply normally. What they call 90 days food supply uh, averaged out, I guess, over the entire planet. I don't quite know how they calculate it, but they come up with this figure. And so I remember at the time thinking how alarming that figure was, that it was such a short period of time. And of course, now they're talking about like somewhere around about 50 days supply now that we've subtracted Russia and the Ukraine and created problems for fertilizers and agriculture in Western countries as well. But the point is, I think people should have been alarmed years ago at how fragile the food supply was, even in so-called normal times. Um, uh, yeah, I did
What
have something else to say. Oh, go on. Yeah, I'll let you talk because I've only got half an idea
what
actually, so
you're
I'll be quiet.
saying is reminding me of Earth Overshoot Day. Is when you go through all of our civilization supplies and start drawing down the planet.
Yeah, we've probably
And
already got there for this year, haven't
oh
we?
no, not yet. That's when
Not yet.
the synchronicity comes in. I looked it up. Earth Overshoot Day is on my birthday this year.
So you've got a birthday coming very soon, have you?
July 31st. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. Yeah, I got
Yep.
one in July too. Yeah. Um, but yeah. Actually, I was trying to hatch something intelligent to say about. Yeah, that's what it was. Uh, Back when Torstein and I were talking about the analogy of the fish in in a tank of water, but I think the thing was civilization. I'm wondering whether it goes even deeper than that. That this comes into the realm of Sheldon Solomon and his terror management theory. Or that wasn't his theory. Whose theory was it? But anyway, he spoke about terror management theory and this inability to be able to process the prospect of dying. And so, we enter into all these denial strategies. Um, and uh, I'm wondering whether that's what's happening here, because as I said earlier, in the conversations that Hugh had with Faulty and Blondie, how they both absolutely understood that we were completely screwed and the situation was not redeemable. Um, and uh, that we've got this situation where civilization is uh, we can't afford to let go of the idea of somehow saving civilization because uh, subconsciously we understand that without it, most human beings are going to have to die because there's just going to be no way to maintain them without the kind of high energy fossil fuel powered agriculture, um, you know, food exchange system globally and all the rest of it. So it's kind of like is the fact that uh, activism and and even the thought of fairly significant thinkers stops at a certain point and dares not go any further because of this death terror, because you can talk about the end of civilization or civilizational collapse, but it implies as unavoidably the death of most of the human race or human beings on the planet, I guess.
Yeah,
So I'm wondering if there's a kind of a cringe, that there's a withdrawal from that because it's too much.
yeah, you really can't fucking talk about this subject at all, because there's like a small child with some disability that relies on Western medicine. And, when you bring up this topic,
It's
the
going to die. Yeah,
even the suggestion is, you want little Billy to die, or whatever, even if you're just trying to analyze the situation. So if you're not even advocating for an end of civilization, but you're just going, well, this appears to be the inevitable outcome over the next few years. And I think what's interesting about this whole current war, whatever the hell it is, scenario, is that it's accelerated, or it's bringing us closer into view of like a really fucking serious crisis, in the sense that, again, me being detached from the realities of everyday existence, but and just learning about this thing of like, there's the fertilizer has become so expensive that, again, on this island, farmers will be thinking twice about how much of the stuff they're using, but we won't find out about the consequences for another year or so. But it looks like a possibility that the amount of stuff that grows in fields might be reduced by 50%, or that the price will be double, or whatever. And then suddenly you've got this thing where a bunch of knock-on effects happen. There's already talk of like starvation and stuff around the world. The British government is considering the possibility of having to do load shedding, which means rationing electricity, even in this coming winter. And so a bunch of events that would, and these are things that maybe if you were living in some third world country, you'd be going, yeah, whatever, tell me something I don't know about, and it'd be quite normal. And I've lived in circumstances where that was a kind of normal thing, that supplies of certain commodities were limited, and you'd have to just get used to the idea that on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday you only get two hours of electricity. And in itself, that's not that bad. But what it reflects is our rich societies that don't have to put up with that sort of thing are suddenly like teetering on the brink. And so we're looking at this stuff that, even I think among people like ourselves, we're going, oh yes, civilization is collapsing, the environment's gone to shit, the economy is going to collapse. But it's now sort of happening in a much more dramatic and imminent feeling way, so that I can very easily imagine this time next year not being able to take for granted getting any type of food, or not being able to take for granted that I can use the internet all hours of the day, and so on. And I think that for someone like Faulty to tell the truth, if he sees things through a similar lens that we do, is that he would be confronted with that, the impossibility of having to basically own up to the fact that, yeah, millions of people are going to not survive, just because that a disruption to, again, the provision of various medicines. People get, I mean, when you think about things like I don't know, certain antidepressants, where once the doctor puts you on that medication, they don't tell you this, but once they put you on it, it's very, very hard to get off. Even these, again, I don't know anything much about this, but as far as I know, all this antidepressants that the doctor makes you pop as soon as you turn up and say you're feeling a little bit miserable, but there are these things that they give you that are really, really hard to get off. And so if you have a disruption in the supply of certain pills that people have been given, there are people who will go into like an immediate crisis as soon as the Prozac runs out. If you've been on Prozac for even a couple of months, it can be incredibly, like, the consequences of withdrawing can be horrific. And you think something like that might happen sooner than later, and you end up with like people who just can't fucking deal with things. Is that?
I don't think it will be a catastrophe with the people who, if the Prozac disappears, because if the Prozac disappears, that means that a lot of the causes of the depression of those people, the reason why they're going to see the doctor is suddenly going to disappear, because suddenly they're going to have to fend for themselves, and they're going to have to find water and food, and suddenly
Are there like physical withdrawals?
yeah, oh yeah, but they're not.
Like
Yeah, but
physically
of
sick?
course. But think the worst is the people who use drugs, illegal drugs, or people who drink a lot, alcohol, or alcoholics, or people who are addicts of all sorts of kind. That would be a very difficult crowd to deal with. That would
Yeah,
be
the
much
ganja
more.
allotment project would be a great collapse
Yeah,
scenario
yeah.
to think about.
But I think that what you said earlier is, you said there's going to be probably. Maybe we don't know how many people are going to die, because it's impossible to talk about that sort of forecast in the collapse of civilization, whether it's going to be sudden, gradual, whatever. But yes, if civilization disappears, the numbers are going to be high. They're already high in Africa and a lot of countries. People are already suffering from civilizations and dying by the thousands. But you know, what choice do we have? We're going to have to face an enormous. Hugh was talking a lot about that. You know, are you ready to die for something bigger than yourself? Are you ready to pledge your alliance to nature and to the wild world, instead of to the system? You see, it's an enormous question. What's going to happen with our scenario? It's not the scenario that we want, but it's just the scenario that is going to happen in the spirit of flippening. It is going to be massive, and we're not talking about what's going to happen. Oh my God, how can we? It is written. It is going to happen if civilization disappears. This is going to happen. We have to prepare ourselves to survive and help people around us survive or die. But at least, we need to let go of this addiction, to civilization, and it is a very difficult. I know all about addiction. I mean, I was cigarettes were my and I know exactly what it is when you go off, these sort of things. So I haven't had any other addictions, but I imagine that what you're talking about, the Prozac people, those are the ones that might be in the best situation. The diabetics will be in a worse situation, or certain people like Derek Jensen, who is saying that, like, he depends on drugs. If things collapse, he's gone.
Those were the kinds of people I was talking about, like where somebody has become dependent physically on some medication or other. And I mean, the diabetes example, I think when Brexit was happening, that was something that the more doomily inclined in relation to that particular episode were saying, oh yeah, we might run out of insulin or something. So obviously people who need insulin would be pretty fucked immediately, I would assume. So those sort of things, but I think that's coming back to what Gary was saying about the reticence to go as far as talking about collapse and recognizing the consequence of that is pretty scary, I think, and that's why people like Faulty and so on don't really talk about those things. The same reason, I've got a sort of comedy turn that I do, which is my sort of mask. So I do openly make jokes and stuff about the collapse of everything in front of normies, but then haha, it's a kind of stand-up routine, and so that allows them to kind of brush it off and pretend that I'm just a bit of a wag.
The conversation of facing death, I came across a really good insight. I mean, like, even though the goal of like spiritual development to an extent is to escape duality, the civilization itself is dualistic, so we're still trapped in its duality. But this insight I came across listening to this lecture on a piece of media was I thought it was a deep insight. So in the face of death, they said that there's like these two reactions. One is to avoid death at all costs and preserve their way of existence, and that comes at even if that comes at the death of all possibilities. So imagination, transformation, any kind of change, the death of all life on a planet. And then the other pole of that is people who are willing to face their own demise and step into the unknown, and that is the way of infinite possibility.
For someone like me who's been following the ecology scene, or who has been an ecologist since about 1985 in my teens, it's kind of strange to increasingly become aware of a split, and in particular in the later years, between those ecologists who want to save nature and the earth, and those who only want to save our way of living. They want to save civilization, and I'm kind of like, when I see the latter group acting or writing and discussing, I kind of don't really believe them. But then I look closer at them, and they actually are fighting tooth and nail to make industrial civilization prevail. And for that discussion, I made a figure or a tree graph. I'm not. Is it okay if I show that? If I try to show it? I never shared anything on here, so this is experimental.
Yeah, try it
Cool.
again, because I didn't have a chance to
Yeah.
look at it the first time you put it up. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm gonna speak over it, so it won't be only the graph
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
So just tell me if this works, okay? Can you see this now? Can you see a tree?
That's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see it. I
Great,
don't know if
great.
Yeah,
you-
yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. So I'll do it quick. So this is basically on the left here. You have sort of the civilization and the human perspective, and on the right side here you have how it looks from all other living beings on the planet. Yeah. So I basically just go through it left to right. So what the latter group, the group that wants to save civilization, the ecology groups that want to save civilization, they are afraid that organized society will end. And the entire graph here is sort of at or post collapse, right? So the organized society, that means cities and towns and communities of humans, they will end. But on the other side, for plants and animals, life goes on, because life is much more sort of diverse and can live in many more places. Like, for instance, the birds can just fly to another place, right? And also we can't go around the fact of mass human die-off, because the only reason we have so many people now, like 8 billion, is because we figured out clever ways to get more energy and food out of Earth by disregarding every other species or interest on the planet. But that, the end of the organized society and the mass die-off of our species will lead to improved living conditions for every other form of life on Earth and ecosystems. So on the human side, this grinding halt leads to less toxicity and less plastics. So the steady stream of toxicity and plastics into our nature and waterways and the oceans will cease. And that's sort of the most important way to make an improvement in the world, is to make sure that something bad doesn't continue eternally, right? So on the flip side, on the nature side, that leads to a cleaner planet pretty soon, pretty fast. After we stop pouring out our stuff, it will be cleaner air, cleaner water, very, very fast for the nature side, and also for the surviving, no longer civilized humans. trying to eke out an existence. So yeah, and of course the human expansion ends. We will no longer expand cities and expand, communities, industrial areas, domestic living areas. So that means that nature is able to retake cities and to encroach on our on our traditional areas. And of course, the more space nature and plants and animals have, like in post nuclear disaster Chernobyl, the better nature fares, because it's more space to thrive on. And the two final points is the heat, the increased heat with global warming. It stops agriculture through heat itself and through floods and droughts. But of course, life itself is much more resilient, because life is like 1 billion species that are not humans and not cats and dogs. And an example of life being more resilient is the very tree that you see in the background of all this text, because this is they say it's a pine or a fir. To me, it looks like a spruce, like you see in the Norwegian mountains. But whatever the species, the thing is that many city people don't know that you can have wildfires every 10 or 20 years, and these trees will still be standing. In fact, if you when you study old trees, old growth trees like 50 or 100 or many hundred years old, you find that they have traces of wildfires in their wood and stuff for many wildfires that have been throughout their life. And I think with the very first wildfire in the Oslo area that I experienced, I learned a lot about how this is only a catastrophe for the guy who owns the forest, who is going to sell it to lumber and stuff. But for the forest and for the species and insects and everything living in the forest, this is just business as usual. And a wildfire will very soon attract insects that can actually smell it from thousands of miles away and come there, and also lots of plants colonize the fire area, and as I said, these majestic, beautiful pines or spruce trees, they just live on because a wildfire is nothing to them. Basically, it has to get very, very hot for these trees to die in a wildfire. They're actually the entire taiga from Canada to Siberia of this kinds of snow forest trees. They are adapted to repeated wildfires. So that's part of their evolutionary history. So basically, nature can deal with this, and agriculture-based human civilization cannot. And I think there is too much emphasis on how bad things are going to be for humans. In fact, I just checked the so-called 9 planetary boundaries from the Stockholm Resilience Center, and the fact that the whole concept of these planetary boundaries is an anthropocentric, a human-centric thing. So all of these 9 different sort of aspects that are getting worse are only about keeping human habitation or organized human habitation. And the fact is that when there is a collapse of the functional human societies. 8 of these 9 planetary boundaries start immediately improving and become better for the ones who are still alive, for the different species. And the last one, the 9th one, is climate change, global warming, whatever. And that one planetary boundary is the one that caused human society to collapse. But that can easily be seen, spiritually. It can easily be seen as nature defending itself by kicking out the bully in the corner. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very interesting. But it's again the same thing. It's if the anthropocentric view of civilization, this human civilization, is blocking the view for all the environmental people we've talked about. It's this anthropocentric view constantly at work everywhere, and with the people you talk to, which is why I usually don't interact with too many people, because it's just it's exacting.
Yeah, I totally feel that. Like, in America, like I sometimes say to people, I'm like, yeah, it'd be great if America collapsed because then all the deer, elk, wolves, bears, salmon, etc., can take their country back that they've had for millions of years. Because the colonists basically, well, colonists did wipe wolves out in the most cruel ways you can imagine. They reintroduced them in Yellowstone, but yeah, the colonists are brutal. They just went through like a freaking stormtroopers and just killed everything.
That sort of reminds me of that talk that I posted with Schmachtenberger that I find fascinating because I don't know what he sounds like someone who really is very smart, knows what he's talking about. But my brain always does this flip thing where I listen intently to him speaking for a bit, thinking, "Oh, here's a clever bloke," and then something happens, and I think, "Oh no, this is just a guy farting nonsense." And I'm not sure. I don't know. I can't really judge. But anyway, but there was this thing I posted on the Reddit, and he talks with this bloke Nate Hagens or whatever, and they talk about the inevitability of the human beings, becoming what we have become, and that they'll always, there's this like it sounded kind of hopeless in a way that the way our brain works, or whatever, I suppose what you call the ego or alien cortex, is always going to lead to something like this. So hopefully if a procedure like going south just described occurs, that maybe the human mindset will also change so that the whole phenomenon doesn't happen again. Maybe that's what the story of Atlantis and those sort of things is about.
Yeah, I watched that video with that guy on the sub. I think almost everything he says in the analysis is correct. There's only a couple things I disagree with. One is where he said there's like a middle ground between like Mumford and the other guy. The other analysis of technology where one says it's neutral and Mumford says no. Technology has its built-in values and it leads to this no matter what. And he said, no, that's not quite right either. It's sort of like this. And no, Mumford's right. I'm sorry. Mumford is 100% right on that point. And then at the end, I wrote the comment. I couldn't help it. I wrote a comment on that video where I talked about how I snorted coffee through my nose laughing at the end, because he basically said at the end that like the change will result into something that's totally different. I'm like, yeah, no shit. It's called hunting and gathering if we survive this disaster. It's interesting that sometimes those smart people don't realize exactly what they're saying with shit like that, saying like all the energy flows and all this stuff we're gonna have is different. It's like, yeah, the opposite of civilization is wilderness.
Yeah. Well, you see, Bob, about Joe, about that conversation with Daniel S. we were going to have a meeting with George today, and it was cancelled. And because he was talking about this, you know, kind of, is it written that humans are going to go extinct? Like, is it just unavoidable? I went back to visit episode 22 video with Lord Hugh. The title was "Is Human Extinction Predestined?" So I remember in that video that he's warning against this type of people, saying, well, that is the people that are clever and the people that are wise. It's all so simple. If humans were wise, he said, he takes the example of the nuclear bomb. The humans were clever enough to build a nuclear bomb, but if they were wise, they wouldn't have done it. And that guy in the video, he's extremely intelligent. He's just really he's just likes to talk, and he can talk well, and he knows a lot of things, but it's only cleverness. There is no wisdom in that conversation, and there's absolutely, actually, the dimension. I think that there's also a spiritual dimension that's completely missing in it, but there is certainly no wisdom. It's the cleverness. That's it. You should go back to episode 22. We're going to, I'll contact George again to get the meeting going with him again, and we'll be able to talk about this subject again with him, I hope.
Yeah, I was thinking about George's, some of his things. Just from what we've been saying in the last few minutes, I don't know whether it's a kind of a totally worn out or inappropriate thing to say, but a lot of the discussions center around this remark of how the discourse is very human-centered, and what Torstein was saying about the planetary boundaries being mainly associated with things that are relevant to the survival of human beings rather than the general ecosystem. Just some observations. Are we really unnatural? In other words, even this complex technical civilization and all the rest of it, which appears to be divorced from nature, but is there a sense in which it's still part of nature? We still grow out of it. We're still an extension of it one way or another, even when we're hanging right out there with AI and silicon chips and all the rest of it. It's still part of the continuum. And so even though this seems to be very perverse, what's going on the planet at the moment, could it still be considered just an extension of the natural process of life on this planet? And so what is occurring at the moment is a kind of inevitable outcome of that. And just another point about the anthropocentric accusation is that the only discourse that can occur is the anthropocentric discourse, because we're the only ones who are kind of talking, at least talking in a literal way. I mean, I suppose you could definitely say that nature is communicating all the time, but it's not the kind of literal discursive thing that human beings engage in, the exchange of ideas and all the rest of it. And this brings me back, because Sophie's just mentioned George. And one of the things that I noticed George said a few times in some of the discussions that he had with other people was he seemed to be a little bit down on human beings because he said, well, we're the only organism or the only animal, I can't remember the exact words he used, but something, we're the only ones that don't have a purpose. We don't have a reason for being here. We don't fulfill an ecological niche or have any, we're not like bees that pollinate and mosquitoes that transfer viruses here and there. Most viruses are useful things, not necessarily damaging things, like some of the ones we're experiencing at the moment. And it was as though, we were some kind of terrible biological aberration because we're an apex. He said we're an apex predator without any predator for us. So we've run amok and all this kind of thing. And he kind of reminded me of something that Hugh said, probably only a couple of times. He didn't make a big point of it. Was that that if we go extinct, then there's a good chance that conscious awareness might never arise again. That it was a one-off occurrence, and this is the one thing which I think is our purpose. Is what is the crowning glory of human beings, if it isn't politically incorrect to claim any kind of glory for them at this stage, but is the fact that we've got this self-reflective consciousness, which apparently nothing else has. And we can reflect on other things and reflect upon ourselves and reflect upon our own consciousness. And in its highest form, of course, that leads to our spiritual awakening. And of course, most human beings haven't got anywhere near that. But this is a great loss. I'm just trying to. Sorry, just because I'm tired, I'm having trouble directing this to where I want to get to. Yeah, I guess my thing is I'm aware that it sounds like a defense of human beings at the very time when they appear to be indefensible because of the destruction that they're wreaking. But I think we have to acknowledge that there is something special about them that would be a great tragedy if it was lost. And we can't. I just, my inner feeling when people sort of trash the human beings as a totality, as because of the damage they're doing. I don't want to subscribe to that 100%. That something very, very important has gone on as part of the process of our coming to be here. And losing that entirely seems to be a great tragedy. It's as much of a tragedy as losing the sort of supposedly separate natural world. And I guess what I'm trying to do, I don't know whether it's just my own personal thing. It's a case of my projecting my desire to preserve myself personally onto a desire to wanting to keep the at least some of the human species going because of the higher things that they are capable of. I don't know if anyone else has got a comment.
Sure. I think humans are still part of nature and will always be part of nature. And we have to remember that for 99.9% of humans' time on the planet, we were not civilized. I mean, we're not doing these kinds of atrocities that we're doing now. And I also think that the best metaphor allegory I've heard for civilized humans is for a swarm of locusts, or grasshoppers or whatever you call them. So if you have one locust, it can sort of go away its merry way and eat some farm produce or whatever they do when they're not swarming. But when I go into the swarming stage, they, fly here and eat everything there, and I fly over to this farm and eat everything there. So civilized humans are kind of like a perpetual locust swarm, just devouring everything in our way. Um, but I also agree with you about humans being special and different and stuff, also in a positive way. But we have to remember that 99% of our speciality or being different has proven through the centuries to be wrong, because philosophers and other people have said, yeah, but we are the only ones who can hear or see or speak or walk, or people have had all kinds of ideas about how special humans are, and then other humans have found that seems that the plants can do that as well. Yeah, it seems the fox can do it. Yeah, the bear does it. The pigeons in the street do it. Okay, so they also feel pity for a friend who's been run over by a car. Okay, yeah. So basically, everything that humans say that we are special uh, about, we are not. It just takes like a month or a year, and somebody finds it now. It seems everybody can do that. But I like the idea. I'm the first person to defend science and art, and all the great Dichter und Denker, which is a German concept. The big, cultural heights that humans have been to. Maybe we peaked like 200 years ago. I think that's an interesting question. When humans peaked and just retarded, started retarding. I'll just shut up now.
Yeah, what I was referring to regarding human beings wasn't so much those things that we have in common with other living beings. It was this idea, specifically this idea of self-reflective awareness. In other words, we're not just conscious, but we know that we are, and we can reflect upon that. And in the case of which animals and other things do not appear to be able to do, they may have awareness, and yeah, but I'm talking about their. It's not just consciousness; it's consciousness of consciousness, which takes it to another level. Is what I'm talking about. And if that's not enough, in the case of people who, the thing that Hugh has spoken about of getting past the alien cortex, and the alien cortex is at the level of consciousness. And even he was saying we've got to get past that as well. The meditative state, and Bob and I have had some discussions about that. It goes at another level even beyond that, which is beyond the mind. In other words, it's like a consciousness of consciousness of consciousness, which if you try to think about that, you'll find you cannot do it. And so the mind falls silent. And that is what I'm referring to, because it seems that humans are unique in being able to reflect upon their reflection. And that this has led to our, I guess it's led to us, well, very much being God, because like in the traditional Eastern and I think in a lot of genuine spiritual traditions, is this idea that God created the universe or created the world for, if you want to put it in biblical terms, like for his pleasure or whatever, um, because you have to produce something that can reflect upon what's there in order to know that it's there. In other words, in order to experience existence, God had to bring the universe and the world into existence. I'm sorry, I'm explaining this rather badly, but and I think that's the role that our consciousness is supposed to be fulfilling. Is that the culmination of the planet and the ecology and the animals and everything exists, the crowning glory of that. And I don't mean crowning glory in some kind of sense that it's superior or that it lords it over everything, but our consciousness is the kind of capstone of that, because that is the thing that can look out over this creation and appreciate it in its totality for what it is, in a very conscious and aware way, not just living in it and being aware of the part where you're living in, but actually being able to have a comprehension and apprehension of it. And I think that's what sets human beings apart. And the great tragedy in losing human beings is that it's kind of like putting on an amazing performance at a large theatre or venue, and not having an audience there. Is it still just being done, and then the people on the stage retire and nobody ever saw it? It's to say that human beings are like the witness of and appreciators of this glorious creation. We're sort of, I'm sorry, I can't explain it more clearly.
That's very clear, Gary. Thank you. No, for the time it is for you. Thank you. You started this on the premise of George saying that humans have no role. He says, he said have no ecological role, which is even kind of more narrow. Actually, he doesn't give it the dimension that you're giving. But could that be what you're describing? Our role in this world
that's what I mean, that there is a role, but it's not a strictly ecological role that I think George had in mind. I felt that he needed to expand his idea of what might constitute a role and a significance or a meaning in our existence, because even if you want to just look at it from a point that I can't defend, but the comment is, nature is not primarily in the business of creating useless things. The fact that we're here,
we're there to witness and shut up, basically, and admire and be, but we're not.
But I mean that's it, and our awe and amazement at existence and our absolute enthrallment with it is, I think that's our function, and it is the function of being God's sensory apparatus in the world. If you want to put it that way. I mean,
look at the comments. Can you read the comments, Gary? There.
Because okay. Sorry, I haven't.
No. But it's funny because the last ones are. Is there a difference between our witnessing and a mouse or a bee? My role is to be here and say, "I told you so." We are the eyes of God. I mean, these are all very interesting comments, because it's opening a new direction in this conversation, because
I can't see
yeah.
it, unfortunately. It's
If
not
you go
hang
into
on, here we go.
comments, if you're not on
Okay.
your, if you go into
Well,
comments,
I suppose the question
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the difference between you or me witnessing something and a border collie witnessing something. I mean, why do we need to witness it?
Yeah, well, yeah, well, that's my point, is that the dog is witnessing it, or the bee, or whatever, but it's simply aware of what's happening. But I'm saying that we are aware that we are aware of what's happening. And if we become spiritually awake, and we've even gone beyond that, that we have become aware that we are aware that we're aware of it. And so,
How do we know that though? How like is a bee not aware of being aware? Maybe a bee is aware of being aware.
well,
Well, one of the things I came across a long while ago, I can't remember the video or lecture, but they were talking about how like wild animals live their archetypes, and human beings can become aware of the archetypes and talk about them. That's something I think is probably a different.
yeah, I think that's getting towards what I'm trying to say.
Isn't it? But how do but there's no way for us to know what the subjective experience of other beings is, even
No, yeah, I
subjective
agree,
experience of
but you know,
neighbors
you're
is.
quite right. We just have to. I know there's never going to probably be a conclusive
Well,
way to.
Well, I mean, there's no way I could know like what it's like to be in a lion sort of culture and ethos, so to speak. But even Hugh talked about we have the same mammalian wiring, so we can empathize with like animals and lizards and stuff because we have those same parts of our brains.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I suppose it would be reasonable to assume that a lion can have a spiritual experience or be aware of his or her awareness as well as we can. Then, if you think about that, yeah, if you
Um,
think it's sort of the same sort of machinery or whatever it is.
No, they have.
yeah,
I think they're wired up to the mammalian brain, and then humans have the primate, and then the alien cortex. So, because we have the alien cortex, we can do things that a lion cannot do.
the other
But
thing
that's not
is,
that. Yeah, but that's not to say that because we have an alien cortex and we can craft tools or write shit down, that means it's superior. I don't think it is, but it is unique. It is sort of you know, our species thing. Like lions, they're strong. They hunt they're good at bringing down prey. They have their social bonds, and then humans, we sort of have this meta layer of consciousness where we can see our archetypes and talk about stuff and then express stuff through art and all that.
yeah, which
see,
is
I
why
think,
it is the problem of the alien cortex could be rediscussed again, maybe in a further meeting,
yeah,
because
we
then
might have.
we're coming to the heart of the beast. We're coming
Yeah,
to the heart of the beast, of that part of our brain that has made us all run amok and destroy everything around us, and that is talking now in this conversation, that is running through us, even though we know that we have to master it, and we know that we have to maybe smash it, to just bend it under our control. It's still talking to us. So we're in a kind of a, actually, it was Hugh that was often saying that these meetings are actually alien cortex based, you know?
yeah, it's the digital. So, like if we remember, most people are right-handed. Alien cortex is the left hemisphere wired to the right hand. And basically, its whole thing was to extend the reach of your right hand. So think of technology. Now it's like we got civilization. So since, the alien cortex projected its fucking, blocks all over the planet. And now our collective right hand is squeezing the earth like a freaking stress ball because we don't want to die. But it's like the trick is to take that sort of, even Hugh talked about this, take that sort of um, pathology. It has to put things in boxes and put itself in a box. And maybe that's how you create the quantum observer, where it just sits there and doesn't interfere with all the natural processes in the body and in nature. and just goes along with the stream of life.
Yes, you see, we are, everything is unique. A bee is unique, a lion is unique. I mean, humans are unique too. And what is making our uniqueness is what we've been talking about. It doesn't make us superior, better, but losing human beings mean that we're using our uniqueness, whatever nature it is, and anything that disappears in this world, any species that disappears, whether it's plant, animal, insect, or whatever, is a tragedy. And the disappearance of human beings it would be a tragedy because of our uniqueness. It can be discussed at extent.
Aren't we uniquely causing many other species to disappear? And in that case, maybe our disappearance at least would take less uniqueness out of the picture.
Yeah, I know that, but that might be part of our uniqueness. It's black and white. I'm not saying that it's a beautiful uniqueness, but there is uniqueness. There's some uniqueness in the organism that caused the plague, and it made, it's just that the tragedy is the imbalance and the dominance of the what we call the alien cortex in the human beings. And then we come back to this. We come back to when we evolved from our primate brain to our sapiens or Homo sapiens brain, and whenever this part of the left cortex started to operate for us, when it started to dominate and lead us to be destructive around us, is that where the problem resides. And that's what I'd like to discuss with George when he's in with us, because he really deeply thinks that we are just we're just an error, that we shouldn't be here. And that makes very little of nature, because nature wouldn't do that. Nature doesn't. Oh my God. Oh God, that's very bad. Sorry, but I've just looked at the
Yeah, I mean, I would want to encourage George to read, Freddie Perlman's book Against History, Against Leviathan, because he has this multi-layered approach, and he even like this book was written in the 80s, and the guy basically identified the alien cortex. He basically called it like the spirit that runs civilization, like a war machine. Called it Lugal Gazizi, Optimus Maximus, all those sorts of things, and then said that he even said in the book that civilization is a web of humanly meaningless constraints, meaning that it is inhuman, that we have put basically our humanity on the altar and sacrificed it to this machine. And so this is not humanity. Civilization is not humanity. It is, it's something else. It's a machine. Um, yeah, yeah. So I agree with Freddie Perlman, because like think about it. No other animal on this planet works willingly to cause its own health to fail like this. Like lions don't try to cage themselves up and wither away. Um yeah, like even Hugh talked about a lot, like our brains are shrinking, like the human animal parts of our brains, the neurons are shrinking because of domestication. So it's like this civilization is not human, it is an inhuman malaise. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's wonderful stuff. Thanks for that. I just I guess thinking about George's comments, and it kind of tends to lead to this point where I have to ask the question. I don't think is there any going to be any benefit in us being ashamed of ourselves? Because it's
No.
where you know, and I think that's what, on the one hand, we don't want to be engaging in hubris about how fucking wonderful we are, but to be absolutely self-flagellating about how miserable the results are that we've created, at least physically, in the world, and engage in it, because we seem to have this polarity between this very anthropocentric view of things, and what's going to keep humans alive and what's good for humans, and then there's no middle ground, and then suddenly there's the other extreme, was just how shameful and rotten we are because of what we've done, and how completely worthless and damaging, or worse, we're either worthless or we're positively outright a curse to the planet, which I don't think is very resourceful either.
Was this the sort of free will thing? The non-dual awakening thing says that we have no agency.